Welcome to the Relational Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Wes Thompson, joined by my co-host, Austin Hill. Today, we are talking about direction and really the lack thereof, and how lack of direction, lack of vision, lack of purpose leads us to boredom, leads us to idleness, and can lead us to isolation. And all of those things ultimately help lead us back to those old patterns, old behaviors, and struggles that we deal with. And so today we're talking about direction and vision and the need for a North Star. Without that vision, people fail, people perish, people struggle. And so today we talk about a simple exercise, a 6-minute exercise that we go over at the end of the conversation, but really we're fleshing out what it looks like to clarify our passion, our priorities, and our purpose. And when we're clear about our passion, our priorities, and our purpose, it helps keep us focused and have a clear vision for what we want. So when we get pulled into those unwanted spaces, right, back towards our addiction, we have a vision. We are able to stay clear about the things that we want and the things that we don't want. We know what to say yes, and we know what to say no to. So thanks for listening, and we hope this is helpful. Austin, what's up?
Not much. How's it going, Wes?
Oh, happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday.
Excited for the weekend, excited for I was just saying I'm tired, so I'm ready to go into the weekend and hang out with family. But here we are, another day. I've been excited to talk. Here we are on the Relational Recovery Podcast, talking about the stuff we love, which is how to be healthy, how to grow in health, and it's challenging. And today I want to talk about, when we think about recovery, we think about addiction, we think about unwanted behaviors of all sorts. I think one of the things that we struggle with as humans is just being intentional with our lives. And so today I want to talk about just lack of direction and how, we're in the new year and a lot of people have already made goals and broken goals. And so everyone has this like low grade sense of shame and guilt because they said they were going to do one thing and now they're not. Maybe that's a bit cynical, but it's good to have a sense of direction. It's good to have a sense of vision, and we don't. What we notice and what we see is that leads to boredom and it leads to idleness. And it's in our boredom and our idleness when we often do the things that we say we're not going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to talk today about that. Really, in light of, I think the antidote to a lack of direction is vision. And in order to have a vision for our life, I'm going to sound like a Southern Baptist preacher right now, but we really need to reflect on our passion. We need to clarify our priorities. And we need to, and as a result, have a clear definition of what our purpose is. So three P's. So starting off corny.
As a recovering Southern Baptist, I really appreciate that.
Oh, good. I'm glad I'm in good company.
Yeah.
I want to open up, being Christians. I think this is a scripture passage that I've reflected on quite a bit lately, but it's found in Proverbs 29, verse 18, and I'm reading from the Message version, but it says, if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. But when they attend to what he reveals, they are most blessed. Just that idea of not being able to see, I think, really embodies where we find ourselves when we're in the throes of addictive behavior. We don't see the good. We only see the bad. We can't quite envision a future that is not in the disorder that we find ourselves. Our brains being just habit makers. We've got these neural pathways in our brain that lead us down the same pattern over and over again, and it's hard for us sometimes to see a different way out. And so if we're talking about direction and we're talking about, purpose and passion and priorities, I think we first have to recognize that as human beings, we are habit makers and we are living out certain habits right now. You and I, everyone listening, we have a predisposition based on our story and the life that we've lived and our experiences to interact in the world a certain way. And if we're going to change that, we're going to have to be super intentional. It's going to take a lot of energy, but it's doable. And we're going to have a community around us of like-minded, growth-minded people. Because if not, we're just going to default back to the original pattern. And so if all of us struggle at times with lack of direction, which leads to idleness and boredom, which then leads us to usually our unwanted behaviors, we've got to have then direction. So that's the setup. What's your initial response when you think about that?
I think what popped up in my head was the difference. Like when we first think about unwanted habits or just like habits in general, we think about these small, short things where if we lack direction, we think, well, I can fix this with a couple of small tweaks and things will be better. And I think for me, there's like two groups of ways that we can address things, or like the thing that we're trying to go towards. So there's like the small day in and day out things that you can see the results of really quickly. But then there's the ones that you can have those small day in and day out habits, but they affect this like long-term thing. So for example, a long-term thing, you can see a pattern or a rhythm where if I overwork, or if I work 60 hours a week and I'm not home enough, like I can do that for a season. And where it's just like, okay, my family can handle it fairly well for a short amount of time. But then if it keeps going on, things are going to start falling apart. But I'm not going to see that result right away.
Yeah.
And then, so it's the same thing, I think, with any other habit. Like if we use like just drinking, it's like, well, I'm just going to drink, 7 days a week, just one. That's not that big of a deal because I'm fine. But then that slowly changes, and you do that for 6 months, and by the end of that 6 months, you realize like I'm drinking 6 or 7 every single day. But it started off as fine. So it's this like when we have these small habits, we need to know that they affect us. They can't, just because we're not seeing the short term effect doesn't mean it's not going to show up in other ways. And so that is one, because it's not front of mind. I'm not seeing the negative results of this small habit right now. If we have vision or a purpose for our future, we're able to make those decisions with the small things a lot faster, or be able to make them with more confidence instead of saying it's like, it's not going to affect anything. Anytime we say that about something, or that's good enough, it's going to have a long-term effect.
Yeah.
And so it's making sure we can address both of those well.
Yeah. I think a pattern that we often see, like at the Refuge, the recovery community that we're a part of, is guys come in very disordered.
Mm.
Their brains, their bodies, the way they're coping with the situations of their life, right?
Their daily habits.
Yeah, their daily habits. And they go through this long process of essentially creating new patterns and new habits. But obviously our program lasts 13 months, which is long. It sounds long, but if you've been in some level of disorder or chaos that brought you to the Refuge, right? If you've done that for like 20 years, then after that 13 months even, it's going to be easy still to default back to old patterns. And so you do have to have direction, and you got to like maintain that. And so what the pattern we often see is someone will go through this 13-month process. They'll be feeling great, and because they're living in these different patterns, but oftentimes I'm not going to say often, but But unfortunately, what can happen is if someone leaves and they're not intentional, like you said, right, they'll slowly start to default back to old behavior.
Yeah.
A lot of times that looks like antisocial behavior. So, I got, I was living with a group of people. Now I'm living by myself and I'm isolating and I'm not sharing and I'm not serving and I'm just sitting in my room every night. And that, evolves into, drug use or whatever. And then you find yourself in this place where you're like, how did I get back here? And so again, it starts with major intentionality. I think all of us knowing we have a pattern. And if we're not intentional, we're just going to live out the pattern.
Yeah. And that's true for like big things and small things. It's the issue. The challenge is identifying that pattern. Like, and it's not just like, I think, and that's a connection that people can make in their lives, that they care. If you care about somebody who's trapped in addiction, they are just living in a pattern. And if you can help them find that pattern of that unhealthy behavior that leads to that unhealthy behavior, it's good for their long-term health. If you also see it in yourself, because what leads to addiction is broken relationships, not access to drugs. So it's how do you have healthy relationships, consistent ones, deep ones, like this great article. Dang it, I'm going to do this. Wall Street Journal just did this article on Harvard did this long-term study over 80 years of what makes people live longer, healthier, more fulfilled lives. It's deep connection with people. That's what it is. If you want to live longer, it's deep connection with people. And they studied people for over 80 years, them, their kids, and then their kids' kids. And the ones that lived longer and were healthier and had more fulfilled lives, the one connection they had was deep connection with people. Like, that doesn't mean just one person in your family. It's friends. And like, which is amazing, because that's the thing we're shooting towards. And there's there's also this other like devastating study that came out that in America, 1 out of 7 men identifies like, I don't have any friends. So like, it's just, that's why like connection is what keep us alive. So those two things that came out very, very recently, if you're a guy in the Refuge and you're like, this seems like a whole, or if you're just like somebody who's listening, you're like, man, like I'm not feeling the best right now, or I'm frustrated, or things aren't working out well. It's like, how are you doing with your relationships? Like, do you have a handful of deep connections? Because that right there is the thing that's going to make you live longer. And but not just that, because that's not the end goal. It's having a fulfilled life. And lo and behold, like, because we're Christians, like, what is the thing that Jesus talks about the most? It's like, how do I have this relationship with God and a deep relationship with the people around me?
Yeah, it's really fascinating that you brought that up. Just the thought of having no friends. I'm reminded of Rich and Jim, at Crosspoint. One of the things they say a lot is that the quality of our life is dependent upon the quality of our relationships.
Mm.
And man, that's so true. I mean, a lot of time, like, right, if we're not relationally healthy, we're faced with a lot of problematic emotions, one of which being loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes it's in that kind of space, right, where we act out because we can't tolerate that loneliness. And so some of us go to drinking or drugs or sex or overworking or whatever it is, like overeating. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? We're trying to create a new pattern, but unfortunately how we cope is often in that unhealthy way. And so we've got to find like a healthier way to cope. And that only comes with having clear direction. Going back to the beginning, like if we don't have a clear aim and we find ourselves in that place of boredom and idleness and even isolation, we're gonna default back to the pattern. And so we got to stay intentional. We've got to have a clear direction. And so to keep us on track here, I want to do, maybe we can riff on each one of these, but if we want to have clear direction and we're saying then we want to talk about passion first. We have to kind of use our creativity, I think, and start to think. So if you're somebody who's maybe struggling, right, we got to start by activating some imagination, which is asking ourselves, like, what do I love? Like, what could my life look like if I wasn't stuck? What, like, is there anyone that's in my life that I look at their life and I'm like, man, I wish my life looked a little bit like that. We're trying to activate some passion, having a vision of something better than where we currently are. And maybe somebody listening, like you are, like you can think of something that you love to do. That's good and healthy. We have to kind of activate that. We kind of have to like build that up a bit, I think, to start, because we need some fuel to get going, don't we?
Yeah. I think it's also realizing that we are responsible. Like when you say activate our curiosity, it's intentionally putting myself in a situation where I have the ability to be creative and think. And what's needed for that is space. So kind of going back to what you're talking about, boredom, and idleness. So it's kind of like boredom is the start of idleness. Boredom is also the start of creativity, which is needed.
Yeah.
So it's like redirecting this thing that is happening, that's already happening. So don't be afraid of boredom, but know that like I'm bored. That's an opportunity to be creative and have those thoughts and like think through those things and have those conversations.
Yeah.
And if you're in a situation where you feel stuck, it's really hard to figure out what am I passionate about. If you're bored or you feel stuck and you can't think of something, you need to talk to other people and ask them, like, man, when was the last time you remember me being excited about something? And if you don't know them, like guys in the Refuge who they've known each other for a handful of weeks, often it's like, ask the guys around you, where did you see me excited and come to life in the past handful of weeks? What was I most excited about? Was it solving a problem? Was it helping somebody out? Was it wondering about things? Was it having deep conversations? Or is it just getting like you love accomplishing things? So it's that there are ways to do that if you feel stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about guys in the beginning of the Refuge, and they're looking at potentially over a year in this process, right? And I think I would encourage you, if that's you, to ask yourself, like, what is it that I want? What do I want my life to look like when I launch? What do I want my life to look like when I'm reunited with my family, or I'm out on my own, working a job? What do I want my life to look like? And just start to take baby steps to get there. Because, one of the markers of someone who is in overwhelming addiction is really struggling with impulse control. Like, I want what I want and I want it now. And unfortunately, life just doesn't often look that way. So that's why we need to, again, be curious about our passion, because we need to notice, okay, what is it that I want? But also recognize, okay, I might not be able to have everything I want now, but I could get that over time, And I think it's that disappointment of not getting everything I want now that then even makes us go back to where we came from. I mean, I remember a tragic story of someone that we both know, last year, who was doing so well, and but he was wanting to have he was wanting to reunite with his daughters in a way, and he had this picture in his head of what this relationship with his girls could look like, and it wasn't happening in the timeline and in the way that he hoped for. And part of the reason was because he had unfortunately hadn't been in their lives for several years. And they're at this point where they're like, in college age and that kind of thing. And they're not responding to him the way that he wanted them to. So he acted out. Right. And unfortunately, that's what we do a lot of the time. It's almost like this, I'll show you, I'll hurt me. And it's almost like, unfortunately, he engaged in the behavior that led them to not want to be with him in the first place. And so it's like and so I say all that to say we have to know that that is our pattern. Like, we want to get better. We realize getting better is hard and it takes time. And so then we tend to act out, right? Because it's like our direction typically is too short-sighted and unrealistic, right? And it creates this sense of, oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't, maybe it's too much, and it's in that place of overwhelm, it's in that place of boredom, in that place of idleness, in that place of just unclarified direction, that, or lack of direction, that we get stuck and we can't get out. And so again, just we gotta stay in our passion. What are we passionate about? I wish with that individual, I wish that, okay, you're passionate about reuniting with your daughters. Stay focused on that. It's just, it might take longer than you initially hoped for.
Yeah, and it highlights that we are not singular, like one-dimensional beings. There's multiple parts to us. So, like, if it's your life at work, your physical health, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your friends, and your relationship with God, and how you relate to Jesus. If you're improving in health in one of those, it's going to look very different in how it improves. So just because, like, man, if I get, like, I do believe that if I can get, the closer I get to Jesus, it improves my other relationships. But God didn't make us as just spiritual things. So if I improve my physical health, that is evidence that I can improve other relationships in my life. That's not the be all end all. Like, that's kind of like where it goes sideways, is when if I can improve my physical health, everything in my life will work out. Like, that's one part, but it took time to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it might take like a year to fully, like, get you to where you need to be. But other people, it might take 5 years to get where they want to be physically. And so what I mean, and the reason why I'm saying that is just because you accomplished one part and you improved one part of your life into better relational health doesn't mean that it's going to take the same amount of time or even less. Like, you can't raise all of those at the same time. And that's frustrating to people because, like, I would like to say, like, well, if I can have really good friends, then the relationships in my family will naturally improve, will just magically improve. Or my physical health will just improve because I have really good friends. Like, that's not how it works. And so instead of being discouraged because that miracle didn't happen, see the one thing that improved as evidence that you can improve things. But it took intentionality with that one specific part.
Yeah.
And so it just takes time.
Yeah, I think this segues well. So in order to have direction, right, we've got to really be creative. We've got to activate our imagination, and we've got to clarify our passion. What is it that we want? Can we notice what excites us? What is it that we want? If it is, I want to reunite with my family, or whatever it is, stay focused on that. So the second thing is, and it goes along with, I think, where you were kind of going there, is priorities. What are my priorities? So, okay, I'm paying attention to my passion. Now I've got to start clarifying, what are my priorities? What matters most? And I think sometimes what ends up happening is our passion gets activated. You see people's, the light bulbs start to turn on. We get excited. Oftentimes you notice when passion's being activated by people's excitement. Oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Oh my gosh, I'm excited about what I'm going to be doing. And, after I leave the Refuge, or for anyone else listening, we start to get passionate. But where it can fall off the rails is we get overwhelmed by all the things that we want. We get overwhelmed by all the options that we have. And that's why we have to prioritize, because we end up wanting to do everything as quickly as possible. And we either burn out or we get paralyzed.
Mm.
We burn out because we try to do too much too quick, or we get paralyzed because it's just too much. And then that leads back to the idleness, because it's like, well, I don't know that I can do it all. Like, the passion's waning because I'm realizing that I don't know that I can do all of that the way I want it to in my head as quickly as I want. So I'll just do nothing at all.
Yeah. Mm. Well, and it's also, to make it even more complicated, when you find something you're passionate about, if you put too much emphasis in it, it'll overtake other things. Like if you find a career you really like or a job you're really passionate about and you feel joy there, it's hard to pull yourself away from it. But then if your priority, because like if you have a family, your priority is your family. And so there's this tension between it where I can be really committed to work, but then I lose the priority of my family. So am I working to provide for my family, or am I married to my job instead of my spouse? And then and then this is the other, if you want to be really focused on your relationship with Christ and you emphasize it so much that you reject people and you are only focusing on this, just like constantly being known for being like following everything in the Bible, which is a good thing. But if it becomes the thing that pushes you away from people, which is what the Bible tells us to do, you're missing the point. So it's about these interconnected parts of who we are, because that's how Jesus led his life. He didn't just live in the synagogue reading the Bible. He was constantly with people.
Yeah.
So it's about that balance and prioritizing what was most important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really good. And I think that what this looks like then is, I think all of us would be better and would be, I think, probably less anxious. And especially when the whirlwind happens and we get tempted, or we start to want to act out, we start to get reactive. We would do better by clarifying what is most important right now. That's priority language. Okay, you're getting passionate, you're feeling better. What's most important in your life right now? So when you think about, those of you that are in the refuge, especially those of you that are early on in the process of recovery, what is your most important goal right now? That needs to be crystal clear, because, man, tomorrow, later today, whatever, you're going to be pulled, you're going to be stretched, you're going to want to go back to where you came from. That's, again, we're going to want to go back to the default. And I've got to keep my mind and my heart laser focused, right, on what is most important right now. And I might have a list of 5 things that are like, okay, these are my top 5 priorities, but I really need to stay laser focused on that top one, because when crap hits the fan, when stuff gets hard, I've got to have a North Star to stay focused on, that keeps me centered, especially in those moments where I want to, basically check out. So any thoughts on that? Like how you think about even priorities in your own life? Or how you've even seen this play out in the people around you?
Yeah, I think when we say something's a priority, or we've identified that if I don't prioritize something, it doesn't mean that's the only thing I focus on. It's that's what the majority of my focus is pointed towards. So if I have a priority of my family needs to be number one, that doesn't mean that I don't come into work anymore, or I don't go to the grocery store, or I don't take care of any of the things that help support my family. It's a matter of, or even a guy who's in the refuge right now, if your number one priority is your family, right now the most beneficial thing you can do to be a good father or a good husband or a good son is make sure you're healthy so you can be that person. So for a season, you're having to focus on something that doesn't look like it's directly pointed at your family, but it's about making you the person you need to be so they are the priority.
Yeah.
It's being willing to like have a benefit or a good thing come in the future instead of like right now. So you have to be patient.
That's such a good word. Just real quick, I think what comes to mind for that is that when we start to get healthy, I think it's in human nature that we have this sense of responsibility to our fellow man, where we're like, and especially the people that we love, like, oh my gosh, I'm getting healthier. I need to like contribute. And especially, we see this at the refuge where it's like, a guy starts to get healthier, and there's this sense very quickly of, oh my gosh, I've gotta like, I'm not with my family right now. I'm not taking care of my kids right now. And there can be this sense of like, I gotta go. And we obviously are never we don't want to be too quick to just be like, no, 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 you've got to stay here. But recognize that often is something to caution deeply, because often the question I ask is, where have you been for the last 10 years? And unfortunately, oftentimes that's met with, well, I was in my addiction. I wasn't there because I wasn't in a good place. And my response then is what you just said, Austin, which is the best gift you can give your family if you want to show up well is to be healthy yourself, to foster and cultivate the habits, the rituals, the lifestyle that you're going to be able to show up and, like you said, be the husband, be the father, be the son that you want to be. But recognize that if you don't have those tools yet, if you haven't gotten your reps in to where you can maintain that level of health, then you're just going to show up and go back to the same thing you were at before. And guess what? That's not going to be helpful. And so you got to walk it out for a while. There's a reason why our process in particular is longer, because we recognize that it takes time to develop, right, some new habits that when we do launch out, when we do go back to that family, that we have some kind of discipline in place and some new goals in place, and we've walked it out long enough that we can sustain it for the long term. That, because we're not in a sprint here, man. Life, like, it's not going to be helpful. It's like, man, I'm going to go show up for my kids for a couple weeks. It's like, no, like, we want to show up for our kids, like, for their life. I mean, this is, we're aiming at a marathon here. Like, we want to be healthy for the long term. So, yeah, sorry, man. I just got excited when you were saying that, because I think that's important. So,
Yeah. Well, and there's like also, that's just not like, wishy-washy makes you feel good feeling. Like there's evidence in parent and child relationships where the bond between a parent and child is stronger if the relationship was broken and it was healed than if there was no break in that relationship ever. Like if it was always just, fairly positive, that's a strong bond. But there's something beautiful about seeing somebody at their lowest, where they're harmful to themselves and others, and then they've changed, healed, and redeemed those relationships. That bond is stronger. So for guys who are here, like, man, I've messed up my relationship with my wife, with my kids, with my parents, there is hope in that. There's hope for your future. That the bond between those people that you care about most, when it is healed, which takes time, but when that time is past, it can be stronger. Like there's hope there. It'll look different, but it is stronger. And also, if you're telling yourself, like, man, I need to, especially like specifically to guys who are in the refuge, like, man, I need to take care of my family. I need to help pay their bills. Like, do they want someone who can pay the bills but never be there? Or do they want someone who temporarily they can't help with a bill, but they have you back as a father? Like, which one do you want? Like, do you want to be able to pay a bill for a year or be their father for the rest of their life? Like, which one do you want? And that's not for everybody, but specifically, I'd say the vast majority of guys who have kids in the refuge.
Yeah.
It's going to be better for you to be a long-term father than to be able to pay a bill for a year.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, Austin, is like you're giving a vision for like it's long term. It's like we've got to have a longer term vision. We got to have the direction that we're talking about. It's not just next week. It's like we got to think about our whole life. So it's having that bigger picture. Okay, so we're talking about, we want to have direction. We talk, if people can't see what God's doing, they stumble all over the place. That Proverbs 29:18. And so in order to have direction, we've got to first focus on like what are we passionate about? We've got to get curious about that. We've got to then clarify our priorities. What is most important? And I got to keep my focus on that, because I know I'm going to get distracted. I know I'm going to get pulled back to those old patterns. And then lastly, all of that's going to give me more clarity on what my purpose is. Like, what is my purpose? And I know that I've done a lot of work in this area. Right now, I can say, my purpose is to help people wake up to what is true and good and beautiful. And I think about that every day. Like, that's everything I do. It just fires me up. Like, I want to help people wake up. I want to wake up to what's true and what's good and what's beautiful. And it's like the more clarity that each of us have on what our purpose is, passion, priorities, purpose, the more clarity we have on our purpose, again, the easier it's going to be to say no to the wrong things. Because it's like, man, if it doesn't line up with what I'm passionate, if it doesn't line up with my priorities, if it ultimately doesn't lead me to my purpose, and it has nothing to do with my purpose, then I know that's a no. Then I'm not going there. So we got to have clarity around what it is that my purpose is, because without purpose, without vision, without all this stuff, we're going to fail, and we're going to be left in idleness and boredom and lack of direction. So what does that look like for you when you think about purpose? And I just want to hear from you on that.
I think it's for me, it's knowing and having confidence that the purpose that I have today is going to change, and it's okay that my purpose today is different than it was 10 years ago, because we go through different seasons in life.
Yeah.
But it is vital that we actually have one, because it gives us some sort of direction. And like, I think people are like paralyzed often by this idea of like, well, I need to make a decision on something, or I need to move in a direction, but I don't know if it's the right one. The reality is like, you need to make that decision and move forward, because to me, it's for this type of thinking of like, what is like a purpose statement for my life? If I have the wrong one for a couple of years, and then I realize, I need to adjust it, I would say it wasn't wrong for 2 years, because those 2 years helped you clarify a more focused, more accurate, more clear purpose of your life.
Yeah.
So it's not perfection.
No.
We're just looking for a good direction.
Just pick one and start there, right?
Yeah.
Pick one and start there. It's like, where are you at today? How can you say it today? What language can you give to it today? And all of this is meant to give definition to vision. Because oftentimes, we hear people talk about vision. We're like, what were they talking about? It's just like, I feel like we're talking about nothing. Like, we're giving definition to what we mean by vision. If you have clarity of passion, clarity of priorities, clarity of purpose, then it allows you to know what to say yes to and what to say no to. And when the temptation, the triggers happen, and you're pulled, you literally feel pulled. Clarity on all these things is going to help you be grounded. That impulse control, to be able to say, okay, I need to slow down. I need to think. I need to pay attention. I'm being pulled right now. I'm being triggered right now. I'm being tempted right now. Remember, what am I passionate about? What are my priorities? What's my purpose? And that's going to allow me to remember, okay, I know what to say yes to. I know what to say no to. And that I'm going to have a higher probability of staying on track with what I've said I want.
And I think something that, like, as an this is a weird encouragement, but I am becoming better and better at identifying what my no's are when I make mistakes and say yes to something I shouldn't. Like, so like bad decisions, you can learn from bad decisions.
Absolutely.
So don't stop yourself from growing by just not making a decision, because not making a decision is also one.
Yes.
Like it's not like yes or no. There's the indecision forces your hand in a direction or not. So like have those and it's about like these small ones that happen day in and day out, where we have moments of truth where we can decide to speak honestly, or we can hold back and not make that choice. And we need to lean into those. And the more often we do it, we're more likely to see them throughout the day. And we realize that the more we think about our purpose, we see how almost everything is connected to it.
Yep.
And that makes decisions easier.
It
because
does.
like but like it's hard to do it if it's hard to be like, I don't know what my purpose is. Like, well, just start making choices towards one, and you realize, is that yes or no? So it's kind of like, this is like, if someone like, how do I even start this? It's, what do I love? Like, what am I passion? Like, what am I good at? And what do I love? So like an example is like, for a career, it's like, I love my kids, but I'm not a huge fan of like, I don't want to hang out with their friends all the time. So I means I probably shouldn't work with kids, just because like that doesn't give me life. Like, I love my kids though, but also like I really love food, but that doesn't mean I need to own a restaurant. So there's like these defining things that I can identify because I made choices and I tried things, but I'm able to very clearly say like what I'm not passionate about because I worked in something or I tried something. So it's not about perfection right away. It's about chipping away at the things that I know I don't enjoy or I do enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to close this with some just crazy, I'm going to try to sum this up in just application as quickly as possible. And again, you don't have to be super smart to do this. You don't have to have a degree to do this. I'm going to give a 6-minute example because everybody's like, I'm too busy or I'm too distracted. 6 minutes. Go somewhere where there's a clock. Pull out a piece of paper and something to write with, and give yourself 2 minutes and write a bullet point list. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about being right or wrong. Write a list of what you love. I love ... Spend 2 minutes on that. All right. Write as much as you can in 2 minutes and then stop. And then for 2 more minutes, do the same thing. Write, what are my top priorities? Okay. And this one, it doesn't need to be long. That one's more about, it might take you 2 minutes to come up with your one top priority. But spend 2 minutes and define what's my top priority or what's my top 5 priorities. And then thirdly, 2 more minutes. Give yourself 2 minutes to write a purpose statement. What's my purpose? Try to be clear, concise, and direct. Boil it down to one sentence. There you go. 6 minutes. Spend 6 minutes to define your passion, priorities, and purpose. And then in a couple days, come back to it and look at it and say, yeah, that's it. That's it. Or no, I want to edit it. And then spend 6 more minutes working on it. This doesn't have to be long. You don't have to be super smart. This can be really easy, but the goal is, how do I use that? Is starting out, carry around that piece of paper, put it in your Bible, put it in a notebook, whatever, carry it around with you. And when your mind starts to drift, when you start to feel pulled, when you start to struggle, read the list back to yourself and say, no, this is what I love. This is what I'm focused on. And keep coming back to your passion, priorities, and purpose, because that's the North Star that's going to keep you with direction heading where you want to head. And that's what I need. That's what you need. That's what we all need. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Relational Recovery Podcast. We'll be back soon with a new conversation. We'll see you then.